I mean, there's still military bases all around the planet, like American military bases in Japan, American military bases in Germany, American military bases with American troops all around the planet. And then you say, and then you fucking sit there and you act like, you know, that's not imperialism, when of course it is. Imperialism is not something that just Russia does. Okay? Even though what Russia is doing in this circumstance is imperial ambitions, absolutely. Trying to overtake a country through violent means in an effort to try and pacify them and demilitarize them is imperialist. There are many different ways of doing this. America does soft power imperialism and also boots on the ground military warfare imperialism. But it's just such a normal part of life for all of us, a normal part of our existence that we don't even recognize it. We don't even think about it. And that's the difference. The approval ratings argument for collective punishment is what al-Zawahiri used to justify 9/11. Let that sink in. Yeah, I mean, dude, I've brought that up before. Like people that say there are no more innocent neutral Russians anymore, that say, okay, well, we fucking invaded Iraq. George W. Bush's approval rating in the aftermath of 9/11 was like 94%. It's a crazy fucking take. Why are we talking about America? We know they suck. This is about Russia. Because this is a largely Western audience. And in a largely Western audience, we already know that fucking Russia is bad. Okay? We've already covered that stuff, you know, over and over and over again for the past like for the past 7 days, especially. There has been a like 12-hour Russia bad stream going on. And we need to move beyond just that. Obviously, that fact still remains. So the West did bad shit and Russia's doing bad shit. Move on? No. Absolutely not. And the reason why, so you have covered that USA is bad for 4 years? Exactly. So why are you fucking upset that I'm continuing to cover that? I'm an American citizen. A lot of the people in here are also American citizens. When you're an American citizen, you theoretically have more to do with your country, with your own country, than even Russians do with Russia, with what happens in the Russian government. Okay? So, of course, I'm still going to bring up American atrocities and acts of war, especially because I want you to understand that the way that you fucking feel about Russia right now, the way that you feel about Russia right now, because of Russian imperialism, Russian imperial ambitions, Russian actions in Ukraine, is exactly almost a one-to-one fucking comparison to the way you should be able to feel about American acts of imperialism as well. This is not an opportunity to deflect the attention away from Russia, considering the fact that there's still a fucking banner up top that says, you know, Putin is very bad, okay? And that I have covered the Russian atrocities, I think, quite adequately over the course of the past fucking week, or even longer than that. But you have to remember, Chomsky echoing what you're saying, of course, Chomsky says this all the time. Here's Chomsky's take on sanctions, even though I also, once again, I have to clarify, I don't know what to say about sanctions in this situation, because like it's a sense of helplessness that has also created this situation with sanctions, because there's nothing else you can do. But here's Chomsky's take on sanctions.
So if you take a poll among U.S. intellectuals, support for bombing Afghanistan is just overwhelming. How many of them think that you should bomb Washington because of the U.S. war against Nicaragua, let's say, or Cuba or Turkey or anyone else? If anyone were to suggest this, they'd be considered insane. You know? But why? I mean, if one is right, why is the other wrong? When you try to get someone to talk about this question, they just will try. They can't comprehend what your question is, because you cannot comprehend that we should apply to ourselves the standards you apply to others. That is incomprehensible. Now, you know, there couldn't be a moral principle more elementary. I mean, all I have to do is read George Bush's favorite philosopher. You know, there's a definition, famous definition in the Gospels of the hypocrite. The hypocrite is the person who refuses to apply to himself the standards he applies to others. By that standard, just, you know, the entire commentary and discussion of the war, so-called war on terror, is pure hypocrisy, virtually without exception. Can anybody understand that? No, can't understand it. If you take a
Yeah, I mean, he's still old as fuck, even though this video is old as fuck as well. U.S. imperialism on the whole has been good. Greatest decrease in extreme poverty, huge increase in life expectancy, large flow of capital from rich countries to poor ones. Dude, these kinds of takes are so fucking, like, abysmal, so morally abhorrent, so disgusting that I almost want to fucking, you know, face the TOS head on and show you a compilation of fucking war crimes that the United States imperialism has created in Latin American countries, in Africa, in the Middle East. Like, show you the fucking dead babies lined the fuck up just to get banned for like a month, just to show you how disgusting America has been around the world. It fucking blows my mind how stupid you can be. Imperialism is imperialism. There is no moralizing imperialism. There is no you know, civilizing force of imperialism. You only think that way because you are no different than the fucking aristocrat's child in colonial British Kingdom. Okay, that's what you're doing. You're like, oh, we're going in there and we're actually civilizing these barbarians with our Maxim guns. Very good, very good. These barbarians, they're in tribes. They're killing each other with spears. Thank God for the Maxim gun. Like, that's what you're doing. It's like, it's good when we kill people. That's what you're doing. That's your take. That's your approach. And every country that is imperialist in nature, of course, has people who have the exact same fucking attitudes like this. No, that's not bait. That dude literally thinks that way. I've heard him say shit like this before. Like, despite Vietnam's current approval rating of the United States of America, there are still children being born with like disabilities as a consequence of the war crimes that we had. Like, a consequence of the war crimes that we engaged in fucking South Vietnam. Not even North Vietnam, in fucking South Vietnam. So, miss me on that shit, okay? Do you remember my takes from 6 months ago? Smile? No. And also, I love when people say American imperialism has been a force for good. Are you a dengist? Like, I don't understand. Like, oh, we've eradicated global poverty? Really? Take China out of that equation. See how much we've eradicated global poverty. You know what I mean? Motherfuckers be like, American imperialism, great. And then literally talk about China single-handedly eradicating global poverty, extreme poverty in the global scale. And act like that was America's doing. It's always America, dude, right? The flow of capital, they destabilize our countries just so they can get bananas and diamonds cheaply. That piece of shit has never left NA once in his fucking life. Exactly. Destabilize a country, ensure that no nationalization occurs. The country is already poor. Now they're trying to fight a fucking war in the midst of a civil war that's probably occurring as a consequence of American goading. And then they fucking turn around and they say, hey, now that like we forcibly put our guy, our puppet, in a position of power and in the throne of control in your nation for the crimes of wanting to nationalize an extraction industry or any kind of like key sector that is important for our Western interests. Now we're just going to fucking pump you full of IMF loans, okay? But those loans are conditional. Those loans are only going to go back to, again, Western companies, okay? Multinational corporations that operate at the heart of the imperial core. Once again, you can only use them on our companies. They're going to come in. They're going to build the fucking. They're going to build the refineries. Okay. And those refineries that we are building, they are conditional too. They come with a fucking high price point. You can't have anything to do with the profits of your own fucking soil, of the own oil that we extract from your soil for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Who gives a fuck, right? You don't have the technological advancements to be able to build that on your own. Then the secondary consequence of those IMF loans is also austerity measures. You have someone finally, like maybe a social democrat after fucking 10 years of like horrific dictatorship regimes, ultimately get toppled by either direct action, violent revolution, or even the fucking ballot box in certain circumstances. And now you have like a social democrat or even a socialist, right? But usually like a tepid social democrat that comes into a position of power, Lula, okay? And even then it's like, all right, well, that's not acceptable either. You can't actually fucking do the things you want to do even as a social democrat. You can't fucking change the course of your own country. You can't change the policies in your own country. And the irony, of course, is that you can't do that in America either. If you wanted to, for example, in the United States of America, have Bernie Sanders become the president and implement healthcare, universal healthcare coverage for all Americans, right? An incredibly popular provision. You can't do that because the same corporate oligarchs that make sure that you can't, implement social safety nets in the countries, in South American countries, are also here saying, no, fuck no, we're not going to do that because we own the Democratic Party and we own the Republican Party and it doesn't fucking matter. It's the same exact corporate oligarchs that are controlling the United States of America. They're the same exact corporate oligarchs that end up controlling South American countries and utilize the State Department and the American government and our foreign policy as a weapon towards the third world, okay? Towards developing nations. We do this by way of IMF loans. We do this by way of the World Bank. And then we do this by building American military bases all around the fucking world. It is ridiculous to not recognize that, even for a second, utilizing this opportunity, seeing like Russia's horrifying actions in fucking Ukraine as an opportunity to like spear dick some kind of like America maybe not so bad attitude is completely unacceptable. I will always shut that shit down. America is not a force for good on this planet, just like companies are not a force for good. Okay? Corporations do not operate at the benefit of citizens. They work for profit. Do not be a fucking fool. Just because they post like an LGBT flag or a fucking rainbow during Pride Month does not change the reality that in a heartbeat, if it were to improve their bottom lines, they would 1000% even go on and fucking fund paramilitary groups in like a South American country that is exclusively murdering gay people if it meant that like they could source palm oil a little bit easier, okay, at a better cost. We have a Supreme Court that literally said, as long as it is done by third parties, that you can do child slavery in your extraction, okay? American and European companies can technically take advantage of child slavery, okay, in distant nations, as long as it's done by third parties and you just have no accountability over that. That's crazy that that's going on. By the way, the murder squad and the assassination of labor leaders is something that Coca-Cola did, for the record. That's a real thing. Coca-Cola literally had fucking death squads kill union leaders. So, we don't tell me about how like there isn't a fucking direct partnership between Western capitalists and Western bourgeois capitalist nation states that operate as a violent faction, as a violent arm of American corporations. I think it's important to note that the slavery verdict was last year regarding Nestle chocolate. Yes. Remember when the WTO changed the definition of poverty $1 a day and declared poverty was over? I mean, they've done that before. They've readjusted poverty prices. Yes, That factors into it too. But you act like China didn't grow in large part because Nixon opened up China up to Western capital and the U.S. didn't sacrifice its industrial capacity in the process. U.S. sacrificed its industrial capacity in the process? You are such a fucking delusional fool. Okay? If there was one thing in that gambit, in that bargain from Deng, it was the fact that capital owners in bourgeois states would absolutely throw their own working class in a pit of fire if it meant melting them for biomatter. And he was fucking right. The U.S. sacrifices industrial capacity, is doing a lot of the fucking carrying there. No, that's not what happened. American corporations wanted to take advantage of the near slave labor wages that China was offering because they had a lot of people and they were willing to fucking throw their industrial capacity at the problem. It made it so that it was cheaper to manufacture goods in China and then ship it back into the United States rather than manufacturing them in the United States. That kind of attitude is so incredibly reactionary that I cannot comprehend how someone who's been here for 12 months could have such a horrific worldview. A horrific anti-American worldview, by the way. You just straight up do not give a fuck about the working class, which you are probably a part of. I doubt that you are a factory owner. I doubt that you are a beneficiary of any of these like American legacy dynasty mega corporations. So that's crazy. That's incredible that you feel this way, that this is like appropriate to say. Show me the deed to the factory. You say you're a capitalism, but you never show me the deed to the factory, okay? Let me see those deeds, boys. Wild takes all around. Yeah, one day you'll fucking own. Sorry, what's wrong with his take? I just mentioned what's wrong with his take. It's not that like this was a sacrifice, okay? It was never a sacrifice. People who try to moralize capitalism fail to comprehend the foundational the foundational observation of capital, okay? There is no good or bad. It's just capitalism. You can add moral values to it. You can ascribe moral values to capitalism, okay? And many do, understandably, because once you move beyond like number goes up, number goes down, supply side economics, and then you recognize that there are human beings that are dying as a consequence of those numbers going up and down, all of a sudden that's an entirely different conversation. But that doesn't change the reality that corporations don't do things for the benefit of the people, okay? They do things for improving their profit margins. They do things because they want to make more money for their shareholders, okay? Increasing shareholder value is key in an increasingly financialized world, okay? This is how finance capitalism works. That's why it's always a laughable notion whenever people say things like, oh my God, China is stealing our IP. Oh my God, China is stealing our IP. It's like, motherfucker, you knew they were going to do that. That was the deal. You knew that they were going to do that. You didn't care. Now that they like blew up in your fucking face and actually their China is prospering as a consequence of throwing their labor at the problem, recognizing that American corporations do not care about anything. That corporations do not care about anything. They just care about improving their profit margins. And there's no there's no comprehension of the working class. There's no interest in defending even the American working class. That neoliberals are going to literally fucking ship their jobs overseas for you, which will then end up destroying the American working class. That you turn around and you go, wow, that's crazy that happened. That was a big sacrifice. It was never a sacrifice. American manufacturers chopped American jobs in favor of significantly cheaper Chinese jobs so they can make significantly more profit, and the American economy moved from an industrial economy to a financialized economy. Yep.
Hey, the video is over now. But if you enjoyed that, why don't you like, comment, and subscribe? And if you want to see more of that, just go, well, YouTube's got it around here somewhere.